Welcome to my community, and I know you'll love it too.
Hi everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you're from and watching this. Welcome to my community where we celebrate togetherness, ourselves, and the power of community. This is your host Maruf, and today we have somebody very special, another community champion on the board, Anna Larade. Welcome to the show, Anna. How are you doing?
I'm good. Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. And today we're going to talk about so many things that you will talk about, and people will explore you, learn about you, and definitely share something that you have not shared before. We need that, some of it.
I will do my best to give you the exclusive.
Yeah, please go ahead. And we would like to first understand a little bit about yourself. How did you grow up? But first, I want to know, when people know about you, when people think about you, including myself, they see a different kind of professionalism. But when you see yourself or at your life, how do you see and what do you see?
Sure. So I guess when I see myself, I try and think a lot about who I would like to be for my community and for other people. So I try and present that face as much as I can and show up in that way. So a lot of that means, like, especially in the not-for-profit world, when you're working with people who are going through very, very difficult times, is you work hard to stay grounded and not take on too much of the suffering of others in a way that impacts you, because you kind of become the scaffolding on which other people can climb. Of course, that's not who I am, right? Like that's not a realistic person to be all the time, but I think that's how I try to show up in my work.
That's wonderful. And we'll talk about your roles and responsibilities, things that you have done and you're going to do in the future. Um, what do you think that, like, how was growing up like, and where did you do that? Tell us about the story.
I was really lucky to grow up where I did and how I did. I'm an only child of two parents. I was born in Vancouver, BC. And I grew up in a house in the suburbs, and I went to French immersion actually because my father's a Franco-Ontarian from North Bay, and my mother is a Francophile who never learned any French while she was growing up in Montreal. So they really wanted me to know French because of my heritage. I know my dad used to say that my ancestors on my dad's side came over with Champlain on the boat. I'm not sure how true that is. Dad loved to tell a yarn, but it's a nice story. Um, I found that after I was done university, as I went and took psychology at UBC, I actually joined the military force reserve. So I served as a medic. And while one of the advantages of being in the reserve as opposed to the regular force is you do have a little bit more flexibility about choosing where you live, whereas in the regular forces, they'll kind of place you where they think you'll be of the most use of service. And so while I was doing my medical training for my QL3, which is kind of when you learn the field medic skills and kind of like that advanced first aid, I fell in love with Toronto, and I thought, so I asked the unit there if I could serve with them, and they accepted me, which I was very happy. I guess I did enough good enough job that felt I'd be an asset to them. And then while I was living in Toronto, I met my wonderful husband, who is from here. So we definitely did a bit of globetrotting. We lived in South Korea for a year. We traveled through Southeast Asia. And eventually it was time to come back to Canada. We came to the East Coast. I didn't know that much about New Brunswick when I moved here. And I wasn't sure we'd stay for that long, to be honest. But things kind of kept working out for us here. I noticed that when you come to people with ideas in New Brunswick, people get really enthusiastic and will help and support you. And that's not something I'd really encountered that much. I think that's how, like, we'll go through a little bit more of my resume. And a lot of it was because when you have ideas and you offer to do something, people will be like, oh, you should talk to this person or you should connect. They'll connect to you and support you in ways that are really cool and were foreign to me, like from where I'd grown up. And I was like, this is really special, right? So now we've been here almost 9 years. It really is home now.
That's wonderful. How you thought New Brunswick would be, and it's your home now, and it is my home too. I mean, the first week I came here, I was crossing the road, and on that traffic light, I asked a person that, can you tell me where is the Moncton Hospital? I wanted to go to the hospital for something. He didn't just show me the way, he actually was there with me throughout the entire walkway. So he took me there and then he said, do you need anything else? I kind of lost my words. That is how people are here.
That's so lovely. I remember I was walking, this was years ago, I was walking up King Street. It was raining, and this lovely older woman pulled by and car said, "Can I please drive you wherever you're going? I don't want you to walk in the rain." It's like, I don't know. I love this place.
So we'll talk about your journey a little bit now. And a lot of you who know you, they know that you've spent over a decade working with different kind of organization and a lot of vulnerable communities. So, and I personally see that you have that passion and love for it. Tell me, where does it come from?
My origin story with how I got involved in the not-for-profit world is kind of peculiar, and it kind of, I'm not sure who else it could have really happened to. So while I was still going to UBC, I, along with about 95% of UBC, was convinced I was going to go to medical school. So, so I joined the pre-med club there, and of course, there's volunteer opportunities because they want people who care about others and are willing to do service as part of your resume. And one of the opportunities that they had was to volunteer at this soup kitchen that was in Vancouver's downtown east side. And I don't know how familiar you are with the downtown east side. It's Canada's poorest postal code. It probably has the most drug use per capita of anywhere else in Canada.
Okay.
It's 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 a neighborhood that does have a lot of struggles. And so yeah, I, up until that point in my life, had not gone down there lightly. It was a place where I felt, especially as this like kind of very protected, privileged suburban kid, you felt scared to walk there, felt scared to make eye contact with people there. It's crazy you think now, but that's how I thought, right? Um, and then I remember being in the soup kitchen, and it's simple, right? You're there, there's food, you serve food, you give a smile, it's not complicated. And I remember thinking, gosh, I had a lot of volunteers. And I remember thinking like, oh wow, some of these volunteers, they seem a little rough around the edges, but who cares? We're all just here serving up food. And I kept going. I just kept showing up because I liked it. And I was soon the only kind of person from that original group who was going. And I learned something. I learned that the other volunteers were not, in fact, volunteers. They were men who had previously been residents of the downtown east side, and now they were participating in a treatment program offered by the Salvation Army in the same building. And I remember that was a big wake-up moment for me. I remember thinking, okay, if I'd known that going in, I would have come in with all this judgment. I would have been acting very differently towards you, and that would have changed the nature of our relationship because I wouldn't have treated you the way I treated you when I assumed you were one of my fellow volunteers, and I put you in the same category as myself. It changed the direction of my whole life. Um, so from there, I went back to school and I got in. I took a social work background, and that I also joined the forces, and then I basically stayed on that career path until I took a brief break to, of all things, do sewing and costuming for a few years when I first lived in Moncton. I kind of worked in a small business and did alterations, but ultimately I came back to my profession, not for profit.
That's wonderful. So you started volunteering from way before, and that's one of the common things between us. And with that, I want to ask you, what do you think is the emotional cost of showing up for others, supporting them, spending time for them, really, really dedicating yourself, and how have you learned to carry it?
So the emotional cost to me, I think it ties a lot into, do you know the term vicarious trauma?
Yes.
So, having a firsthand experience of trauma is like a traumatic event will happen to you, and then there's a reaction that happens in the body and mind that can have an impact on our health, right? And I think what I've come to learn more about is, when we're talking human to human, we're not just like a wall talking to someone who's giving information, right? We actually change inside. Like the neurochemicals in our brain will like adapt to take the same shape and tone as the person we're talking to. That's what empathy is, right? So when you're talking to someone who has is sharing their experience of trauma, it is very easy to go there in your mind yourself and then experience a vicarious trauma reaction. So it becomes important to, um, I like to say it's like, I don't want to take ownership of what other people go through. And I really want to keep clear of the fact that I am a helper. I am not the one having this experience. It's important to stay grounded.
Yeah, definitely.
I appreciate that it can be hard because we feel for other people, and it is painful to hear about the pain of others. Of course it is. That's what keeps us connected as people. But it's also when you choose that to be your profession and you choose that you're going to be living in this world and supporting other people who have had very difficult life experiences, there comes a point where you need to kind of say, I am here with you, but I'm not experiencing what you've experienced. And understand that, like, I even go home to my caring husband and my house and my stability. And it's not appropriate for me to get so wrapped up in what's going on for other people that I become not okay.
That's true. And to me, I feel that in our community, we don't have a lot of listeners available. And there are so many people who has situations to describe, stories to tell, need somebody to talk to. And when you listen to them, it lights them up.
Yeah,
It makes things so easy. And that kind of gives me happiness.
absolutely.
Happiness is something, it increases when you share it. Just like sadness, it decreases when you share it.
And it can be really transformative too, right? Because when you share your story and other people can hear it, sometimes you're able to put words to your own story that you didn't necessarily have before.
True. Very true. Yeah. So a little bit about community engagement, because we know that you've got involved in many ways, gender-based events or any kind of youth mentorship and to many other aspects. How do you do this, and what do you think you have learned from it that you've never learned from the schools?
Sure. So I think I've done this because been open to possibility. I came to my job. So I came back into not for profit in kind of a peculiar way, where I was working as the general manager for a community, like a shared workplace called La Station, which was operating out of the Botsford building above Passage there. And I was working, kind of helping to manage the space and help promote the services a little bit as we were thinking about how to add value for the people who use the shared workspace, right? Because it's a lot of small businesses, a lot of startups, a lot of kind of people who can't afford their own office space, but they're building their stuff, right? And there was a podcast studio. We were thinking, okay, well, what can we do? Maybe the podcast could be something. And then in December 2021, the news came through about the death of Luke Anthony Landry. I don't know if you remember when that story came through, but it was a young man who who died at City Hall.
Yeah.
And it it's funny. I'm just talking about how you have to stay grounded and you don't get affected by pain or blah blah blah. Anyways, that was really impacted myself and the person I was working with at the time. We we um Moncton has changed so much in the last few years, and it just felt like we saw so many people in the community services who were working so hard and tirelessly to maintain a quality of service while the homelessness epidemic really took the hold here. People worked through COVID. People worked through the most unsure times of that danger,
Right.
and things just felt like they were on this runaway train. So we ended up using a podcast studio for me to film a podcast called Well and Fair, where I invited people from the not-for-profit community to come and just, I guess, kind of like you're doing here now. Like, I'm gonna ask you some questions about your work. I want to hear about you. I want to hear about um, and kind of made this assumption that people in that world are so busy doing the work, they do not have the time, energy, or resources to promote the work they're doing to the community at large. It's just not in the budget. Um, I learned a lot about how, because at that point I'd been out of the profession for a few years. A lot had changed, not just in terms of like the severity of the problem, but also all the new research and resources that people had access to in order to like address things in a new way, a more evidence-based way. it light a fire under me to get back in it. So I applied to an organization called Youth Impact, and then I worked there with so Youth Impact kind of has two branches. There's the branch that's kind of supporting people who are under the age of adulthood, and they are people who cannot live with their families for any number of reasons. So they live in homes that are owned and run by Youth Impact. And I was there as staff to help with with help manage the homes and to be kind of like a presence for those kids. And then they have a second branch called Youth Quest. And Youth Quest addresses, so I'm not sure if you know this actually, but so if you look at anyone on the street who's homeless right now, 1 in 4 of them will have been homeless for the first time when they were younger than the age of 18.
Oh, really?
Youth homelessness is a huge driver of all homelessness.
Okay.
It kind of makes sense, right? You're I mean, gosh, you're too young to have a lot of life skills. You're too young to have a lot of resources that would be available to adults. I mean, think about it this way. There isn't even a youth shelter, right? So you couldn't even go to shelter if you're under the age of 18. So Youth Quest is basically designed to help address that gap. They provide services from people ages 16 to 24 to prevent homelessness, right? And so as my role there, I was an employment counselor, trying to connect kids with jobs and work and learning resume skills and learning job application skills. And once we were there, doing kind of like emotional ongoing coaching, right? Because work is hard and stressful, and most of us talk to our parents about it.
For sure. We can get that.
I could go on, but I'll
No. Thank you. Thank you for sharing your words. Where do you think systems fail people the most, and how our community can, step in, make some changes, or where policies are not enough?
I think right now I would like to see as the biggest gap I see is the housing crisis. I think so many of the other things that are visible problems or that people point to kind of do circle back into the housing crisis in a lot of ways. Like I have a friend who works at the Human Development Center. They're really great data-driven knowledge about homelessness, current stats, things like that. And he said something that really struck me. He said, right now in Moncton, and I don't know how exact this is. The latest data hasn't come up, but but we're in the right ballpark with this. Let's say there's about 500 people who we currently know are homeless. There's 200 vacant apartments in the whole city. So let's say everything worked perfectly. Everything was ready. Everyone's ready to get housed. Everyone's connected to the housing. Everyone's got their subsidies. Everyone's ready to go. Just the supply alone, you can't even meet half the need.
But does this mean, just to elaborate on that, there's a lot of people might not understand the scenario fully. So when we talk about housing shortage, do we consider apartments, houses, townhouses, all kinds of houses, or is it a specific type that we look at just to see if there are vacancies available?
It would be all types. And that's actually a really good point, is it's kind of worse than we think, because just because they're available doesn't mean they're affordable already.
Yeah, no, of course, no. Some of them are almost.
And just because they're available doesn't mean they're suitable. Like, let's say, for example, let's say someone smokes. Maybe one of those is a smoke-free building, right? That's not a good match. Or maybe someone has 3 kids.
Yes.
And it's a studio, right? So just because there's 200 vacancies doesn't mean they could be afforded. It doesn't mean that they're the right kind of housing for the people who need them. But what I find striking about those numbers is even if everything was perfect,
Still, we're not even halfway through.
it's the supply.
Supply. That's the biggest challenge.
Yeah.
We've been talking about this almost everywhere now,
Yep.
but things haven't been improving that way or significantly.
Well, it's slow, right? Like I don't ever want to pretend that, because like the lack of investment in affordable housing in Canada goes back to the 90s. It spans multiple generations of government. You do not fix a 30-year problem, 40 years almost now overnight. That is not a realistic expectation to have. But like identifying the problem correctly and moving in the right direction to resolve it is all we can do.
Exactly. Yeah. And we could only support to get this process accelerated
Yep.
from our place. Yeah. Wonderful. Let's talk about Alzheimer's Society of you, Brunswick. Okay. Very excited to learn about that and what you are going to do. What are your vision? But first of all, your works align with the families who go through unimaginable stress and challenges.
Yes.
How do you think that works out for you, and how do you plan to support them, and what are their needs that you want to address and support along with the organization?
Absolutely. That's going to be a new role for me and a new challenge I'm really excited to take on, which is focusing on the fundraising piece, because ultimately nothing happens if there aren't the funds to keep the programs going. And something you see a lot in not-for-profit is there is like government funding available to be expanding or starting new programs. And that's great. You need that initial startup money to see if your pilot's going to work. But once it's established that we have something that's working, operational funding doesn't tend to come as much from the government as it does from corporate donors and from individuals and from when people from legacies, things like this. And there are so many worthy causes that so much of what I think fundraising is to tell the story of the impact that you have, and so that you can be showing that those dollars will make a difference in the lives of others, because that's ultimately why people donate, right? Because they want that money to go into the community and make a difference.
And how do you think community engagement with this group of individuals, families, can make an impact positively?
That's something I've been thinking more and more about as I kind of am ramping up into this kind of new phase of my career. And something I think a lot about is I think that there's still some stigma around Alzheimer's. I think it's something people still feel embarrassed to say is happening to either to themselves or in their family. And of course, stigma is never rational. There's no reason to feel that way. But like, I think we can relate to this. We want to be perceived in a certain way, and it can be hard to accept an identity shift with any kind of health condition. And I think sometimes when the conditions are not very well understood, like for example, not everyone understands that Alzheimer's doesn't just look one way, and not all memory loss is Alzheimer's. It's these little details that you kind of don't want to put yourself in a position to be labeled with something that you don't feel describes your experience.
So I have a follow-up question on your role and how the whole fundraising works, because a lot of our audience might want to know a little bit more. Just on a top line though, when it comes to depending on the partnerships, government partnerships, private partnerships, what is the percentage look like in terms of how Alzheimer's Society of MB has gone through so far, and how do you see partnerships evolving in the future?
That's a great question. And I'll be honest with you, I'm not sure at this right now of the percentages exactly. Something I have thought a lot about moving into the role is that 2025 has been a very challenging year for fundraising for a lot of people. So it's going to be an interesting time, and yet the Alzheimer's Society is growing a lot. I think there's an increasing acknowledgement of the need of their kinds of services as we come into an aging population, and we also see that like a lot of the care burden or the care work is undertaken by adult children, or it's taken on because not everyone has like enough in savings to hire a nurse. What I mean. Family tends to pull in and come through where they can. So it's going to be interesting to get more and more into the weeds on things and be like, all right, where are opportunities to build new relationships? What's a way that we can be telling this story, or what's an insight that we think can be giving our community and more at large, so they can see the value of the work. I think that's where I'm very interested to dive in more.
Yeah, and that could fall into the government space, on the private space, could be anywhere. Oh, that's really wonderful. And you're flexible on that, which is very nice. Now, you as a person, whenever someone, thinks about you, you come off as a very warm, very gentle, nice, yet very committed to work as well. How do you balance these things?
So it's really nice. I I don't see them as mutually exclusive, right? Like I think it's easier to do good work in a harmonious space. It's something that I try and balance a lot in all of my relationships, whether it's kind of my marriage, my personal relationships, my friendships, or at work. Is have you heard the acronym THINK? Of thoughtful, honest, intelligent, necessary, kind. Well, I think about that a lot when I'm trying to function in my conversations and bring things to the table. Is like I never ever ever want to use well I was just being honest as an excuse to say something in a tactless way. It's so important to come at people still honestly, still speaking your truth, but in a way that you've given some thought to how it's going to land on them.
Right. But I'm sure it must be not so easy, though, managing multiple sides and also managing family.
Well, it's not always the moment to have every conversation, right? Like this is actually something a lot from when we were at Youth Impact. We would name, and that's one of the advantages of this profession is we'll name things instead of vibe based in communication. And we talk about have you ever heard the term the window of tolerance?
Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like and it makes sense, right? If someone's, like, up here and pissed and, they're like, let's say you're talking to someone about their budgets, right? If they're up here and, like, "I can't deal with this right now," like, they're not gonna hear what you're trying to tell them. They're just gonna be in that space. And the same thing if someone's, like, really low or really sad or really down. Every discouragement's just gonna drive them further down. Sometimes you can it's okay to give a priority to, "All right, let's take a minute to calm down. Let's go for a walk. Let's get ourselves in the right headspace to have this conversation." But, of course, the key is that you have to make sure you still have the conversation.
Right. And that's where, leadership comes in, and it's not so easy to play the role. But what do you think leadership look like when it's rooted with care in case of instead of control?
I love the buck stops here thing that one of the presidents used to have on his desk.
Yeah.
To me, that's what leadership is you should be the person with the most responsibility. When things go wrong, you are the most answerable. You are the vision creator. You like ultimately it's you are the one who's responsible for what is happening. Um, to me, that's ideally what leadership should be. It is people who are willing to undertake that. Um, I don't think it's easy, and I think that a lot of times you're stepping into a situation where everything is slower and more expensive and harder than you want, and there's going to be learning curves no matter where you go. But ultimately, it's that attitude of, well, I'm going to own this. I think the other thing that's really important with leadership is discernment. We're talking about the window of tolerance and when do you have those conversations. You kind of need to use your best judgment.
Right.
You can make mistakes, right? Sometimes you try and have the numbers conversation and someone was not ready and it kind of goes a little sideways and but okay, that wasn't perfect. Let's come back to the drawing table. How do we do it better next time?
Right. Yeah, and it always requires you to take the first step also.
Yeah.
So the possibility of doing a mistake is a little more, right? And well, that's how we learn also.
Yeah. I hear you.
Now, if you could get an opportunity to redesign how vulnerable people of the community are supported, what are the things that you would think of to me?
I hate to beat a broken record, but housing, housing, housing first. There was a study done in Moncton in 2014. It's called At Home Chez Soi. And this same study was done across the country, very consistent results, whether it was a big city or a small city like Moncton, where people who were housed had much better outcomes in terms of being able to meet their health goals, being able to meet their financial goals, being able to if they are able to, and want to rejoin the workforce. I think people really underestimate how challenging it is to be homeless. And I know that's wild because I think everyone has an intuitive sense of that. Of course, it's like no one wants to sleep outside. But it's stuff like, a lot of people enter homelessness because they're ill. Like people think about substance use, and yes, that's the problem, but physical illness as well. A lot of people have disabilities. It's so imagine being ill, unwell, and I mean, and then you have to keep track of time to get to your doctor's appointment and find the transport when you have no money. It's hard to coordinate and stay on top of those things. What you find is when people have a home, they're able to they're able to go to their doctor's appointments. They're able to consistently keep therapy appointments. They more consistently take their medication. Right? Because it's just so much less likely that things will get lost or stolen. Uh, That to me is the number one piece. And I hate saying that in a way because that is not a quick fix. But I just think there are no shortcuts. We want a shortcut to get through this crisis, and I just don't think there are.
That's very true. And this would, make those individuals' life much more lighter,
Yeah.
because life feels heavier when you have such uncertainties running around.
Yeah.
And what do you feel like, or how do you keep your hopes up? Is what I want to ask you when work feels heavy.
Well, it is really hopeful. That's the weird thing, is that there is so much like good, great work that happens in Moncton. Moncton's one of the national leaders in housing people.
Oh, really?
Yes, we do a great job.
Wow.
Like the kind of coordination you see with not-for-profits in this city is absolutely incredible. People genuinely work together in a way that's like, the heartwarming about the person who is like picking me up in the rain and the person to help you find the hospital. It's like that is everywhere not-for-profit in a way that's absolutely amazing. I just kind of know it can be discouraging because it's like things are more expensive than they were. And a lot more people are vulnerable to entering homelessness. And I think that's kind of what we see is like it doesn't matter how quickly we've been able to get people out because more people enter faster than they can be housed in a way. That's the challenge to me. So it's been really exciting to participate in some systems wide like cross sector. Like I was a part like oh gosh, I hope I pronounced the name correctly. Pondish Pondi. Do you know them?
I've heard about that too, but I'm not
Yeah.
sure what it is.
So they hosted this absolutely fabulous cross sector systems wide with community organizations and health and social development specifically about housing retention. Because having a cross sector focus and approaching things like housing and understanding that it's also a public health issue was just such an incredible thing to be a part of.
Oh, that's really nice to know.
Yeah. It's funny. It's like there is a lot of hopefulness, but that doesn't take away with how painful and difficult it can be to both live together.
True, very true. So when you look back at your work, how do you think people, they have their perception about you? How do you think they talk about you, how you stood for them?
Oh gosh. That's a good question. I don't give it a lot of thought. I know that sounds terrible. I don't think about it. I approach my work as you plant seeds in a garden you'll never visit.
Okay.
I trust that the seeds are good, but ultimately what they turn into is more than just what I can contribute. There's luck. There's other needing other resources because it's no one person that really like the scaffolding thing that I talked about before about how you make yourself into a tool that other people can use to bring themselves forward. You're not the whole scaffolding. There's more than just you that needs to build that structure. So there's that piece. And then there's also ultimately people do need to climb. It's a both and thing. I have no idea how people talk about me when I'm outside of the room. I just trust that what I do is the best that I can give in the moment.
Oh, that's really wonderful. And I'm pretty confident that it's all good stuffs because you have been touching people's heart one way or the other, and I really wish you continue to do so. Yeah. Now, my final question to you would be, what is that one action that someone can take to make the community more compassionate and more supportive and friendly?
That's a great question.
And you can talk about whatever you feel like.
That's a great question. I see that a lot. I think sometimes it's easy to overestimate what that has to look like because we get so caught up in the sheer massiveness of, I was going to say the massiveness of the problem, but really it's the massiveness of what we want for our city. People get so caught up in wanting everyone here to have opportunities, and we want to live in a place where everyone's safe, and we want to live, we want that for our neighbors and for ourselves. And so it's very easy to get caught up in how big that feels. When it can be, think about who is in touching your life, who is in your circle. Text the people in your life that you care about them. Have someone over for dinner. Be that person that offers the ride. I think that as much as we can, putting out where we touch, putting out something positive, I do really believe it has ripple effects.
That's very true. Very true. Well, thank you so much. It was wonderful chatting with you today, Anna.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate being in studio with you and having a chance to talk about something that's very near my heart.
Thank you so much. It's all our pleasure. With that, we would like to wrap up for today. Thank you so much for listening to us. If you like it, please hit the like button, click subscribe, and we will see you in the next episode.
Welcome to my community.